Christianity is a part of our heritage, and therefore making sure that churches are not converted into places of worship for other faiths, which I think is a very reasonable position. I think that should be part of our planning laws, and that's what we will do at Reform.
Reform UK will pledge to restore Britain's Christian heritage by preventing churches being converted into mosques. They say that renewing Britain's Christian faith is vital to tackle the crisis of meaning in the country, and that we're losing Christian values because of the high levels of immigration in recent years. The policy is being launched by Reform's new Shadow Home Secretary, Zia Yusuf. He's a Muslim himself. He joins us now. Zia, morning to you.
Good morning.
Why is it a politician's job to talk about faith at all, I wonder? Maybe let's start with the big question at the beginning of all this.
Well, look, what the policy is about is granting listed status to every church in the country, creating a new use class. And what that would do is prevent buildings that have historically been churches from being turned into places of worship for any other faith, just to be clear. It's not specific to any other religion, but any other faith. The reason that's important is because we at Reform believe, and this is the argument we're making, that a country is more than just an economic zone. And therefore, regardless of whether you have a faith, regardless of which faith you subscribe to, and again, I'm not a Christian, we think it's really important that we protect British heritage. Christianity is a really important part of that heritage. There are obviously a lot more people in this country, by the way, that do identify as Christian than go to church, for example. But again, this is less about whether you believe in God or which God you believe in. If you do, it's about protecting British culture. I'd also say this: if you want to live in a country where we all get on with each other, I would argue that based on emails I get from very, very worried residents, that the conversion of buildings that have historically been churches into places of worship for other faiths is obviously incendiary and unnecessary. And that's why we've announced the policy.
Is it okay to turn it into pubs? I was looking at the list of, I think there's 1,000 churches turned to pubs in the last few years. Does that disrespect the heritage in the same way?
Look, some people might make that argument, but again, when you're a legislator, as I said in my interview with the Times, if Reform win the next general election and I'm the Home Secretary, it is beyond the remit of me or I think any other politician to lecture or moralise to people about whether they should be religious or what religion they should subscribe to. But I do think what is incendiary and worries a lot of people is buildings that have been churches being converted into places of worship for any other faith. And by the way, people of other faiths have agreed with us on that position.
Do you believe in Christian values as part of this country? I'm really interested in this concept of Britain. Does it have Christian values somewhere along the line? Are they different to Muslim values, for example?
Yeah, so I'll give you my personal opinion on this.
Yeah.
I actually went to a Christian school, so I'm not a Christian, but I did go to a Christian school. I think, look, whether you're religious or not, a lot of people might not appreciate that the degree to which this country's heritage is Christian. I mean, even the fact that we have a monarchy, we're one of the few major countries in the world that still has a monarchy, despite obviously some of the appalling things we've learned about Prince Andrew. It still does have wide support, and I think that's important. And if you think about where a lot of one of the things I'm going to say in my speech today is that I do think, and we at Reform do believe, that Britain has been a high trust society for many centuries, and that very precious thing is starting to erode, and in part, not exclusively, but that is in part because of the large numbers of people who've come in a very short period of time that precludes integration from relatively low trust societies. And so therefore, when we talk about a high trust, it's people who abide by both written laws and unwritten laws out of a sense of civic virtue. And so, yes, I think that is that there's a fundamental element of Christian heritage there. And again, that is distinct from whether you follow a faith or which faith.
But what's that got to do with trust? I mean, 'cause I'm an atheist, but I believe in morals and right and wrong. I don't think there needs to be anything in the ancient past that dictates what I consider to be right or wrong. Why is this question of morality tied to a particular religion in your view?
Yeah, and I would agree with you, just to be crystal clear. I think there's no requirement to follow any faith in order to behave well and to behave morally. So I want to be crystal clear about that being my position. And again, some of these discussions are clearly distinct from what would be within the remit of elected officials. I do not think it's the job of a government to be telling people, that they should be going to church or doing any other religious activities. That is for individuals to decide. But again, I will say this, that there's actually been some really interesting academic research that show that countries that have, and again, I'm using the word heritage, right? The history of the country. I think regardless of which faith you follow, this country has had a Christian heritage. Obviously, we have the monarch follows the faith of Christianity. He still talks a lot about Christianity, and there's some really interesting academic research cross-culturally that countries that do have an element of faith in their heritage have generally performed better than ones that don't.
I'm interested in this low trust societies point that you've made. You describe migrants from low trust societies as a threat to British culture. What precisely are we talking about? Because I know your heritage, your parents came from Sri Lanka in the 80s. Is Sri Lanka a place of a low trust society? What's the trust lacking here?
Yeah, so when I speak about that, look, I think there are countries in the world where, and you can measure this in any way that you like, but if you look at crime rates in certain parts of the world, they are materially higher than that, and that is where, by the way, one can have some trust in those crime statistics. And the really important point that I'm making here is integration and the sheer volume of people coming from those places in a short period of time. We all know people. We believe very strongly in the sanctity and dignity of the individual and treating people as individuals. But ultimately, when you have such a large number of people coming from in such a short period of time, and when we talk about the Boris Way, which I'll talk about today, well over 3 million people came into the country in less than 3 years, the vast majority from non-EU countries. That was a big break from what was the case historically, and they've had a dramatic, we would argue, negative economic impact on the country on aggregate. And we would also argue that there's been a negative cultural element to that too, because there's been such a large people. Let's talk about my parents for a minute, because if you want to make that reference, when my parents came to the country in the early 1980s legally, the level of legal immigration on an annual basis was what illegal migration is today. That is the scale at which illegal migration has exploded. And so we've got to address these issues. And I think there are a lot of people in the country who would agree with the position that we have.
But low trust is therefore low trust a euphemism for criminal? Do you think people are coming from countries where crime is more rampant, where they have lower standards? So
let me give you a really concrete example. So look, let's look at a really concrete example, right? So Northamptonshire Police had to give, and I've actually got this presentation. I'm happy to send it to you. It looks like something out of a skit, but sadly it's not funny. It's terrifying. They had to give a presentation to asylum seekers and illegal migrants in a taxpayer-funded hotel, where they not only implored with the residents to walk only on the pavement, but they had to write in all capitals that women have equal rights in this country and that they should not predate on women. I mean, I could go on. I mean, the fact that this presentation needed to be given, that the police felt compelled to create this presentation and give it at taxpayer expense, I think is probably at the nexus of the argument that I'm making. And again, it is why you see so many protests around these migrant hotels. If it was not true that there have been a large number of people coming from low trust places, then I put it to you, Northamptonshire Police would not be having to give presentations telling these people that women have equal rights.
I feel like I asked you this question because you're a Muslim yourself. Are you saying these are low trust countries are Muslim countries? You're effectively saying that the Christian values you're talking about, the values of adhering to a rules-based order, are superior to values espoused by those coming from Muslim countries. Is that what you're saying? I mean, can we be open about that? Is that a fair thing to say? Is it a prejudice thing to say?
Respectfully, that's not what I said, and I don't think any reasonable person would take that to be what I've said. What I've said is, look, there are an enormous number of Muslims in the world. There's huge variance in different Muslim societies. And by the way, let's talk about another thing that I want to talk about today, which is clearly within the scope of a Home Secretary, which is Islamist extremism.
Yeah.
And nobody has been more vociferous and absolutely perplexed about the total lack of sensible approach on this matter in this country than leaders of majority Muslim countries. I mean, you've had very prominent leaders in countries like the UAE say that they don't even want to send their children to school in the UK anymore because they're so worried about Islamist extremism. So it's not just me saying that. It's not just me, Nigel saying that. These are serious issues, and we do think we need to have honest contributions about them. But the notion that I'm making some argument about, people following one faith being superior to the other is simply not even remotely close to what I'm saying.
But you are focusing on, I understand your point, mate, but just leave it here. You're the one who raised the issue of Christianity. Christianity is often used to signify a certain type of culture. That's what you're using it for. You are distinguishing it by the use of a faith. You're not saying British history, you're saying British Christian history.
Look, what's within scope of elected politicians, and in my brief as Shadow Home Secretary, I want to be clear with British people what I would do if we won the next general election. I'm talking about Britain. Britain does have a Christian heritage. I think that is clear. I personally think that, there's immensely beautiful architecture in churches. People who go, if you haven't visited King's Chapel, for example, in Cambridge, which it took 3 kings of England, no less, to bring to reality, and an awfully long time to build it. Regardless of what religion or faith you are, it's impossible not to feel a sense of awe when you're in that building. Okay. I highly recommend visiting it. But Christianity is a part of our heritage, and therefore making sure that churches are not converted into places of worship for other faiths, which I think is a very reasonable position. I think that should be part of our planning laws, and that's what we will do at Reform.
Zia Yusuf, good to speak to you. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
He is the Home Affairs spokesperson for Reform UK.